Hi, my name is Mike Dillard, and this is Self-Made Man, the podcast for men who want to leave their mark on the world and create a legacy of honor, integrity, and achievement in every aspect of their lives. I'm glad you're here, and once again, it is time to forge your destiny. Some of the most fascinating guests and episodes that we've had here on the podcast have been with the founders of companies who've taken what most would consider ordinary, commoditized products and turned them into innovative, successful startups with the addition of a unique twist or a unique little angle. Scott Tannen is disrupting the bedding industry with a completely transparent production process through Boll and Branch. Luke Sherwin turned the mattress industry on its head by taking a relatively boring purchase and turning it into an extraordinary experience that people literally film and post on YouTube. And today we're going to hear from Justin Winter, who's doing the same in the candle industry. I cannot think of a more difficult industry to get into than candles. You have thousands of manufacturers who are basically selling the same thing, a piece of wax with a string in the middle, and the only way to differentiate yourself is by changing your label along with the size, the color, and the smell of the wax. Well, Justin has managed to pull off a stroke of marketing genius when he realized that he could gamify the experience by hiding a prize in the wax of every candle that could only be revealed once it's been used. So as a result, Diamond Candles is now producing well over $20 million per year in sales. And today you're going to hear the story behind its creation, along with an incredibly valuable lesson. And that is that opportunity is everywhere if you are willing to look at what most people consider ordinary in a slightly different way. This week's recommended resource is jingproject.com. Jing is spelled J-I-N-G, and it is an incredibly simple screen capture tool that I cannot live without. I have used Jing for years, and if you need to communicate changes to your website, to your designer or your marketing team, and plain text just won't do in an email, Jing is your answer, and you can download the free software at jingproject.com. With that being said, please help me welcome Justin Winter. Well, Justin Winter, welcome to Self-Made Man. I am super excited for this discussion today, and you've got a heck of a story, my friend.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's been an exciting ride for sure.
So you started Diamond Candles back in 2010, and I just think this is one of the most creative and inventive business models that I have ever seen, and how you broke it as well. I mean, the way you describe it, you guys were broke. You basically built a $12 million business in 12 months. Through free advertising on Facebook. And there's all kinds of wrinkles to this. But first and foremost, if you could, describe what the business is all about and the very unique twist that you have on the candle industry and how you came up with that idea.
Yeah. So my partners, David and Brenda Caton, a husband and wife couple, David was getting an anniversary gift for his wife, Brenda. And this was 30 some odd years ago, and was looking for some special packaging to put that ring in when he gifted it to her, and was going through the department store and really couldn't find what he was looking for, and on the way out, past the candle aisle. So there, in that context of looking for packaging and kind of having that ring in one hand, he said, well, hey, you know what, Brenda, she loves candles too. So let me just go ahead and add a candle. And holding one in each hand, almost this cartoonish light bulb moment, hey, what if the candle was the packaging? And that idea stuck with him. He didn't actually end up doing it right then and there, but it stuck with him for many years. Him and his wife, Brenda, are second generation construction company owners, actually pouring concrete. And the idea always stuck with David. Man, wouldn't it be great? Women, they love candles. They buy them all the time. And to kind of pack together this exciting product concept. So the product itself, and as we formulated this in 2010 and launched early in 2011, really is a ring with a candle with a ring that's embedded about a quarter of the way down inside of the wax. So you have to burn the candle down to kind of get to this little package, which is there. So we wrap it in some kind of a small plastic bag and then some foil so the ring doesn't get messy. And the ring is worth at least $10 at retail, but it could be worth up to as much as $100, $1,000, or even $5,000. And we stacked it so that the chances are pretty good. So 1 in 100 is going to be a $100 ring. one in 1,000 is 1,000, and one in 5,000 is going to be a $5,000 ring. And if you get one of those higher value rings, we don't put it right there in the candle. We actually put a little kind of piece of paper, almost like a Willy Wonka's chocolate factory little slip that lets you know that you've won. And then you go back to the website, you toss in your special code, and then you can actually pick your style and your actual size. It'd be a bummer to win a $5,000 ring, but be a color you hate and a size that doesn't fit you. So that's where it came from, and it was really started as a side project. We had no idea, and day one we had no expectations, and then we went at it, and then lo and behold, it turned into something.
Yeah, I just think it's brilliant how you take essentially a commodity and add. I don't know what the exact psychological component is here. Maybe you guys have defined
surprise and delight.
Okay, There we go. And I'm trying to think of the not the addiction component, but the serotonin dump you'd get. People get gambling when they're on a slot machine and they just never know when they're going to win, right? Or fishermen, every single cast could potentially have a fish at the end, and you just don't know. And it's like the same kind of psychology that you guys have built into this business model. So I'm really interested, when you were thinking about this, how did you walk through the math of the business model? Did you work that out first, and where you were going to get, the rings, and how you were going to source these things? What did that process look like?
Yeah, so we definitely did. We went through and really started thinking about the frequency, and really for those higher value rings, we were really and are still sourcing those from really the same places that maybe a boutique or maybe non-national jewelry chain might be sourcing their same jewelry that they'd be selling for that same retail value. So, really just some Google searches, trying to get people on the phone. Hey, we want, $1,000 level retail value ring. Hey, we're a retailer. Here's our tax ID. What are the prices on that? So we really just kind of started off getting some ballpark ranges, and definitely to start, because we made, I don't know, maybe 40 of these when we quote unquote launched. So we didn't have to worry about those frequencies hugely to start because, we weren't making 5,000. If anything, especially in those early days, we wanted, them to really get found. So we actually made it much more frequent that there would be those exciting ones in there. And yeah, so and really just over time, as we had more volume, we continued to maintain those same retail values for the rings, and just with the frequency, just kind of a simple spreadsheet. Hey, obviously the majority of the ring values, slightly less than 99% of them, are the $10 retail value rings. So that was, the biggest piece to really get right. Although in the early days, especially when things started taking off and we didn't have a lot of great supply relationships, I remember my partner, David, he was literally driving around to department stores, just buying out their closeout ring stock. He was driving hours away. We were losing money on those early candles, but people were buying them. They were talking about them. They were sharing them. Sales were growing by the day, and we just had to get the orders out the door.
How do you get into the candle manufacturing business just starting out? Do you Google candle manufacturer? Like, what does that process look like?
So you uncovered our entire business plan, Mike. Yes, it's not even an exaggeration. We were Googling. We were lucky enough. We found a candle supply wholesaler that sold direct to consumer online, mostly for crafting purposes. Because candles is something you can make in your kitchen as a craft. We found a good source that actually ended up really just being an hour away from us. So we, in the early days, could actually just drive there to save on shipping, given that the glass jars and the wax could be quite heavy. So we started Googling. We bought a used kitchen stove off of Craigslist, which we put in the basement of the construction company's warehouses or offices that we were working out of, and literally just as cheap as we could, just started melting wax, pouring them in jars, mixing the color, and going from there.
Wow. So you guys were literally making them by hand.
Yes, definitely.
Wow. Cool. That's awesome. So this thing turned into a rocket ship, $12 million in revenue in the first 12 months. And at the time, as you mentioned, as a part of your story, you guys were essentially broke. You didn't have an advertising budget. You really didn't know what you were doing from a marketing perspective. At least that's the impression that I've gotten. So what did you guys do? You're like, okay, we've got some candles to sell. What now?
Yeah, so this was right at the time when really it hadn't been that long that Facebook had come out with pages for businesses. So we had, I had originally met David and Brenda actually through Craigslist, ironically enough, looking to help them out with their marketing, advertising, and just kind of overall web presence for their construction company. So we had done some things with Facebook there to some success, really for just the local business. And I had some experience all through college and early on in my first job before that was always doing side projects. Back when, SEO, you could kind of game that a little bit with link building and things like that. So we had that context. So going into the Facebook page, we knew we wanted to run a sweepstakes, give away something for free, and start to build an email list. So that was kind of the pre-launch effort. And then, on launch day, we had like 2,200 email addresses. We basically just spammed our friends. Plus, we had used a company called Wildfire, which Google subsequently bought like a year or two later, which was one of the first kind of social media sweepstakes software companies for businesses. And really, it was a MailChimp email blast to the 2,200 people saying, hey, this is the person that won the 3 days, 2 nights at a beach house, which was actually David and Brenda's personal beach house, which was kind of the prize. So it didn't kind of cost us anything. And then, hey, we have this thing called Diamond Candles. So everyone check it out. And from there, really quickly, because we started so Facebook primary, we really just started encouraging people to share their rings on the Facebook page. And really quickly, we learned that people love to come back day after day and see, hey, man, what rings did people win today? In seeing, the pretty ones and which ones they've liked, and hey, what candle did they find them in? So really quickly, we saw this natural kind of outcropping from the product experience. And then we really just thought, how can we encourage and amplify this for what's already naturally happening? So we started doing a lot more contests and sweepstakes, encouraging people to post photos of their rings, of their candles, of everything like that. And from there, we started to just really optimize on one KPI, and that was really just Facebook likes. So we geared everything we were doing around that. We were small. No one knew about us. So that was kind of our true north metric. And, at that time, the Facebook page reach, things worked. If you could be slightly more popular than everything else in the newsfeed, then you got an inordinate amount of exposure. So we went from 0 to over 1 million Facebook fans in, I guess a little over 2 years. But in just that first 12 months, that was the driver of the business. That was probably 80% of the driver was just focusing on Facebook, growing likes, getting people to come back, posting rings. Oh my gosh, look at this cute ring someone posted today. Everyone check them out, and just keeping people excited.
Very cool. As you guys started to mature, have there been any marketing campaigns that you've run, maybe, on the sweepstakes side or the share this with your friends for some kind of incentive? Have there been really interesting marketing experiments that have worked really well for y'all?
Yeah. So I think one of the key observations over time, and definitely like a lot of people who maybe had businesses that benefited greatly from Facebook at that 2011 through, maybe 2014 time period. And then afterwards, having that wane off. I think the thing which we did not realize at the time, you can hop in Google Analytics and see, okay, here's, where the traffic is coming from. And when we started to see Facebook teeter off, we said, well, hey, if this line item here, Facebook, if it disappears, well, hey, we have all of these other legs to stand on right here. But what we didn't completely understand was that, the number of daily impressions, weekly impressions, that is, people who were just scrolling past, but not clicking through, was so high. That was really impacting all of these other numbers. So one of the continued themes, I think, for us, and I'll end with an anecdote to answer the question was really the combination of, what does real brand messaging and desire generation, demand generation look like in the context of trying to be measurable and direct response and, asking people for the sale and really driving that revenue. And this example is perfect. It was leading up to Mother's Day. I want to say, actually, this might have been 2014. And we had a team of about 6 at the time, excluding manufacturing and customer support. And our brand manager, Paul Davis, we were trying to think, hey, what do we do for Mother's Day, right? We had a couple new products and we had the email blast, set to go, but it's okay. What is the messaging going to be? So we put on our fancy creative hats and said, all right, well, Mother's Day, we were looking at all these big ads for inspiration from prior years from big kind of consumer product goods companies. And we said, we looked at our budget for what we had, and needless to say, we weren't going to be able to spend a couple $100,000 on a commercial that would make you cry. And we got scrappy and we went over to Video Hive, part of the Theme Forest group, and they have stock video clips. And we literally just wrote a script for a voiceover, hired a voiceover artist who basically just read the script for $10 or $15. And it's maybe like a 60-second thing. And then we just bought a bunch of video clips. And then Paul, who by no means is a video editing expert, threw them all together. And we gave that video over to the group that was helping us manage our Facebook advertising campaigns at the time, our agency. And we just said, we were even a little late to the game, and we said, hey, we want all of our customers to see this video. So use custom audiences to take all of our email addresses and match them up with Facebook and make sure, hey, if we have their email address on file, they're going to see this video. And what we saw, we kind of had our daily average volume for, hey, how much revenue we would drive with our Facebook ads. And this campaign, we just kind of blindly said, we want everyone to see this video. And the strangest thing happened. The average view, cost per view was really low, a couple pennies or something. And, we could see a couple sales coming back, but maybe we spent $2,000 or $3,000 on that at the time for everyone to see it, and it was 300,000-400,000 people. And our direct response kind of Facebook ad campaigns, they more than tripled for the 3 or 4 days after being exposed to that video. And we didn't set that up to directly measure that. We weren't trying to be really smart. It was just this, oh, whoops, look what happened over here. And in hindsight, it was like this duh, right? We were priming the pump because it was this very kind of emotional video that had a very, very light kind of at the end of the video, from Diamond Candles, kind of thing. Just like a Pampers commercial or something like that might have. And really for us, it was a big sign, and I'm seeing that more and more today. How do you can't just ask for the sale and close the deal, even though Facebook ads and all these things are great, but the power is going back to the people who can tell good stories, who can create the demand, and then use those direct response tools to really hone in and seal the deal.
Gotcha. So the video was a feel-good video with no direct call to action to buy anything. It was just, hey, this is a cool message for our customers to feel good and to put our brain in front of them. And which it did. And then they saw your ads that had been running in the meantime, which did have a direct call to action. And that, is what prompted the purchase.
Exactly right. Yep.
Cool. Awesome. So would you mind sharing with us, around what you guys are doing sales-wise today and how far you've grown over the last 5 years?
Yeah. So I stepped out of the business from actively managing day-to-day the business with my partners back in February. So I can only share kind of limited details just out of respect for them and since the business is private. So we did $1 million in that first year, then 5, then north of 15, and then north of 20. And that was and that last kind of published number was 2 years ago. So the company continues to do great. Definitely, I know just at a high level, the company is definitely a lot more diversified in terms of, product line, acquisition sources. Facebook is definitely not anywhere near as large as a contributor as it used to be, but Instagram is increasingly large. I know the company is continuing to expand into some offline efforts with gifting and retail stores. And, they're continuing to develop new product lines, and the company's doing great.
Cool. Awesome. So what was your biggest challenge, and where did you grow the most during your time with the company?
I really think one of the big things for me, and, I see this now a lot looking back with my hindsight bias, but now as I talk to people who are at a similar stage, and as I think about my current company, there really is such a science to the order of operations, not only picking what to focus on, but in what order to focus on them, because there's a compounding effect in a lot of areas. Deciding, hey, should we really focus on our customer support operation to really optimize the systems of support now? Or should we just, take lesser time and solve this by adding people on it? Or should we take time away from growth efforts to really focus on maybe this infrastructure piece now? Because at a high level, if I'm looking at a 12-month time horizon, I want to be as far down the road as possible 12 months from now. And that might not look like optimizing for 12 months from now. So I think the only real way to have insight into some of those decisions is to talk with and, get behind the scenes experience from other people who've, tried it both ways when they've been at those junctures. So, understanding, what should we focus on and where, and how much should we invest in these different areas? It's definitely not clear cut for everybody. And, for us, like you mentioned earlier here, Mike, it was this heavily commoditized category with low brand recognition. That's a consumable. We knew at one point in our time we were selling more candles online than any other candle company on the internet, including Yankee Candles, which is like really the largest candle company in the U.S. next to Glade. And that's not necessarily to say that we're so crazy awesome. It's to say how crazy bad the category was, because no one had figured out how to do that online. So, for us, really figuring that out and riding that wave, and when do you switch fulfillment centers, and in what order do you do these things? I definitely look back and say, man, we should have waited on this one, or hey, we really should have started this one other thing earlier. So that's, I think, one of the big major kind of principles that I gleaned from the time. So
I couldn't agree with you more, right? Like if there's the old analogy, if you're shooting an arrow and if it's off 1 degree, by the time it reaches its destination, it's off 20 degrees, right? So what did you figure out? Did you come up with a process for making those decisions in a more strategic manner?
Yeah. So one of the huge ways that, and really one of the most reliable ways I found to make better decisions, was really two things. One of which was just to see what other smart people are doing, and when in doubt, do what smart people are doing. Definitely there were situations where you didn't have enough time to dive in and do a ton of research, because I definitely kind of am a move fast and aim after kind of guy. But I think the list of, hey, the 1, 2, or 3 things that I would need in order to feel comfortable about making a decision, oftentimes when I would meet other people, would be very different than what other people might use. So I really figured out early on that, hey, we're a candle company, but really we're a technology company, and that technology is how we do everything. That's how we reach customers. It, affects our margin and manufacturing and in support. So the tools we use, those software tools are key. So, and because software can be so differentiated and because it moves so fast, this one solution could be 50% better than this other solution, which has really major consequences, for that part of the business, which affects every other part of the business. So I very regularly immerse myself in startup technology news and funding news. What's the latest and greatest company in the customer support space that just raised a Series A round from one of the top 50 venture capital firms? If that product application is applicable to my market, I am calling and emailing them as soon as I see that, without question, right? Because I'm going to say, hey, those are smart people. There's something happening there. And, those types of people are only investing. And if there's an opportunity for a 10x kind of better product or service offering for a company. So I want to get in there and figure out, like, what are they doing that's different? What is their hypothesis and where are they going? And, the same for marketing and advertising, related things as well. Obviously, so much of it is digital. So looking at where are those things going, and then talking with other people who are in the weeds, just like I am. There could be multiple different directions to go on a particular issue. Hey guys, are you using a Facebook ad agency or are you hiring in-house? Well, over the years, I probably talked to dozens of companies that face that very same decision. So the pros and cons of both, the success of both before the fact and after the fact. You talk to people one day who they're in front of that decision, and a couple months later, you talk to that same person, hey, how's that going? And you'd be able to learn from that experience. So, there's a reason why, arguably one of the, I guess it's back and forth, but, Harvard Business School, the case study method is, one of the most common ways to learn in business contexts. But if you're online and you're in a space which is moving really fast, you can't wait till, it's on, till it hits publication, right? Because then it's too old, right? The time to learn how to and figure out how to utilize the Facebook's newsfeed algorithm when you could do that to get that inordinate amount of exposure. That was a couple year window where you could do that and utilize that tactic. And then it's over. So, if you're going to learn what's working well now, you have to regularly be both sharing. And that's how I would always start. I was excited about something I would find. And then I'd email 5 people and say, hey, you should check this out. This looks really cool. I think you might be interested in this. And then just naturally reciprocation would happen. And I would just learn so much in that process. So especially as our team grew over time, as much as a quarter of my week, I was talking to different companies about their different solutions or talking to other business owners or people in different companies. What are they finding that works? How is their business doing?
Have there been any real standout software app, companies that you guys implemented that just were awesome that you love that you'd be willing to share?
So one which is an anecdote I've used before, which was helpful. What is now commonplace, the email pop-up, right? Which every site uses, publishers use them. Most people don't recollect that was not a thing not too many years ago. And I randomly, I think, had an introduction to Ryan Urban, the CEO of Bounce Exchange, shortly after he started the company, and kind of kept track. The service was always on the pricier end of things. And when we eventually got going with them, and we went from 0 to capturing an extra, it was some obscene number, like 15,000 emails a month. It was just clearly this, I am so stupid for not doing this earlier.
Well, let me interrupt you there because I'm feeling the same way about it. So maybe you have some insight here that I don't. So what you're talking about is we typically call in the internet marketing world an exit pop, right? Yeah. You're on a website, a little window pops up asking for your email address, and in y'all's case, in exchange for like a 10% discount off your first purchase, something along those lines. Maybe it's a free ebook, whatever it may be. So we've been doing that in the online world. It feels like forever since I started 10 years ago, but probably 7-8 years ago. And it was a simple, WordPress plugin or website, plugin. And then here comes this company, Bounce Exchange, who is providing the exact same thing for a ridiculous amount of money. And all of these big corporations and B2B businesses are paying so much money to get an exit pop, and they think it's revolutionary. What am I missing?
Yeah. So I think fundamentally the difference is a solution sale. Obviously, what we're clearly talking about is the underlying technology is not in any way revolutionary or complex, fundamentally, right? Certainly there are varying degrees of advanced personalization and things like that, which do get much more complex. But the big thing is, and even now, if a solution like Bounce Exchange, one of the main things I know that, and asterisk, I do not speak on behalf of the company, but one of the things I believe that they are selling is, I don't think they sell a pop-up right now, and they would probably sell, they would communicate the same thing. I think they sell an optimization service, and the software product to some extent is secondary. One of the things, and this was the challenge that I had at Diamond Candles was, and back in college, I remember reading some of your stuff, Mike, and I was kind of in that IM world, and always, I was broke college kid trying to get free ebooks here and there, but I could never afford actually buying the package. And one of the things, at Diamond Candles, you get to this point where there's only so many hours in a day, and I know that I can always be testing every step of my e-commerce funnel, the advertising, the top end, the homepage of the website, the checkout funnel, the emails after the fact, and understanding as a marketer that, hey, as long as I can hit statistical significance in whatever would be a normal business cycle for that piece of the funnel, I am losing money if I'm not actively testing those things. And, I think increasingly in why Bounce Exchange has a business is the alternative to replace the incremental value that solution drives. They're not selling a tool. That solution drives that net value which they're giving. And they do that because, hey, they're doing X number of experiments and variations in testing all the time with that product. So, we worked with Conversion XL, Pep Laha, or I don't know, pronounce his last name, but Conversion XL. And, hey, we paid them a fair amount of money, four some odd figures a month at the time. And I'm sure it's a lot more even now to use Optimizely for us. Optimizely is WYSIWYG. Why did we have to pay someone to do it? Well, because we didn't have time to do it. So our alternatives were hire another person, right? And to hire another person, anyone knows, hey, you take a $40,000 a year marketing person right out of college or something and sit them down and say, hey, run this well, and you're rolling the dice. So long answer, but I think they're selling a solution and the expertise of, hey, to have a similar level of expertise to run this tool and the strategy behind that, your comparable salary for a person would be XYZ. So I think that's really what they're selling against. And, hey, marketers, do it yourself and you have the time to do that. That's great. But I know for myself, all of a sudden you got a $10 million a year business and there's all these things going on. You have to replace yourself at some point. And then you're faced with, hire internally, and get someone trained up, or, you just kind of obviate the risk and maybe pay a little bit more for kind of that part-time expertise externally.
Yeah, it's just amazing how there's so much opportunity right in front of our faces that things we take for granted can become huge, massive businesses as in the form of Bounce Exchange. Like, holy smokes, who would have thought, right? Yeah, but absolutely. And at the end of the day, what are those extra 15,000 opt-ins, per month worth to you guys? And of course, you're willing to pay a couple $1,000 to, to bring those in. So anyway, I thought it was a really cool story, and that's cool. So in addition to Bounce Exchange, you guys launched on Shopify. Are you still using Shopify for your primary e-commerce? So
we are not. The company's on a platform called Symphony Commerce. SYMPHONY Commerce. We're an early adopter there as well, and the company is still on that platform. Yeah, and then been on Symphony, I believe, since maybe 2014. I want to say.
And it's been a good experience, I'm assuming, for you. I haven't heard of them, so I'm assuming if you're still there, it's been working out well.
Yeah. So it's definitely been a good experience. Part of their value prop, so they're really building a solution for mid-market e-commerce brands. They also handle the fulfillment component as well. And for us, if you think about kind of the range of products that have a retail price point to shipping cost ratio, you can kind of think of extremes of, if you sell a bottle of water online, that shipping is going to be insane, and that really doesn't make much sense, to selling a $10,000 gold-plated, Apple Watch. So the ring candle at 3 some odd pounds and a $25 retail price point, much closer to the water bottle end of the spectrum. So we started off shipping the products directly ourselves from where we're manufacturing them at, which was where we were at. And then we used several different fulfillment centers. And every time we would switch, because our volume was so much higher, we saved a lot of money. So for us, Symphony kind of handled everything: order management, fulfillment, and the e-commerce platform, which for us in our business, definitely made a lot of sense.
Very cool. To change gears a little bit here, you, again, left Diamond Candles in February. Why? Mm-hmm. What are you doing now?
Yeah, I loved candles, but certainly I didn't want to play with candles the rest of my life. It wasn't a childhood aspiration. So I had an Evernote notebook of next company ideas that, I'd always been jotting down on, different concepts for a year or two prior to that. And I knew I was going to go one of two directions. Either going to start something else in the consumer goods space, start online primary. Or, I love the growth, the technology, the marketing, that component as it relates to software. And so going completely over to the software side of things, going to the dark side. So I spent a couple months kind of just taking time off from answering that question and just consulting full time at other technology and e-commerce companies and kind of growth and operation strategy. And one of the things that actually was not even on my list is I was just kind of in this mindset of, man, here's these 2 or 3 things on the top of my list. Which one, which problem am I uniquely prepared to solve? Or one way I've heard it put is, which problem in the world am I uniquely gifted for and equipped to solve that no one else in the world is? That needs to be my thing.
Cool.
And one of the things clearly that I saw, especially through a lot of my consulting work at definitely a lot of e-commerce companies as well, I ended up always falling on the customer service department. And if that sounds painful, it's painful for me too, because it was, customer service, that's so boring, Justin. Why don't you talk about something more exciting, like acquisition or like landing pages or products or Facebook ads? And looking back at my time, it was always this thing which, so I was the customer support agent at Diamond Candles for the first 6 months. I got to the point where 4 or 5 hours a day of emails, and I was, the guy basically doing everything else other than manufacturing and finance, which my partners were primarily handling. And, we went through several different iterations of how we handled it. And in every company I was with, whether they had one support agent or they had 30, there were a couple major themes. One was, they were kind of the redheaded stepchild of the company in terms of a department. I mean, no one woke up in the morning saying, yeah, customer support, right? So it wasn't getting the attention of, the CEO or the owners or kind of the primary team. Typically was a department plagued by turnover because those positions were typically the lowest paid positions in the company. And whoever was leading those departments, typically the customer support managers that I would run into were promoted customer service people who, instead of making 30 something a year, maybe they're making 40 or 50 something a year. But they were plagued by a lot of these problems of, how do I really improve things? I have all these complicated charts and dashboards. The CFO or the CEO wants me to make these spreadsheets, and figuring out how to, run a good program, keep people, how to keep costs under control, because obviously that department hugely affects margin for particularly in consumer goods. And then how do we actually use this to be an asset to the company and not be the redheaded stepchild? There was just so many different angles going on there. And I found on average, when I got in there and just spent a little bit of time just saying, hey, this is what we did at Diamond Candles, 1, 2, 3, there's a ton of value we could create very easily. And the value I could create in a very short period of time was almost universally applicable to every company I ran into. So there wasn't any other problem that I ran into that was that universally held, and it was that easy to do, that quickly create results. And so I said, all right, this is going to be it. So I'm going to go into the customer service category, and I'm really going to solve a B2C customer support. So we've been going for 6 or 7 months now, and things have been going great. And we have our 10 or so kind of early alpha customers, and we're looking to change how B2C companies handle support to actually make it a thing which is additive to the organization and isn't this leftover thing.
So the new company is called BoostOpia, correct?
Correct. Yep.
So BoostOpia. So how does it differ from Zendesk, right? Or any of the other customer service platforms that are out there?
Yeah. So we really took a deep look at all of those different platforms. So you kind of have the ticketing platforms like Zendesk, Desk, Help Scout, one of the newer ones, Freshdesk is out there. And all of these platforms, in our opinion, they're fairly good at fulfilling their promise of being configurable to the degree you configure them. But put it that way. And then you have, the other pillars of phone support. So solutions like TalkDesk or more lightweight solutions, maybe like a Ring Central, And then there's a myriad of chat solutions out there as well, along with emerging channels like Facebook Messenger and a lot of these, messenger channel formats. The big opportunity we saw and kind of our product hypothesis and what we're building here, it actually is fairly analogous to the B2B customer service space. So if you're working at a big company or have ever bought something from a big company, you get an account manager after the sale. You get that person very high touch, making sure you're using the product or the solution well. And, because you have this annual contract and you're paying 4 figures, 5, 6 figures a month, right, for this big solution, you don't have the margin pressures of, being Verizon, having to manage a call center, right, and control your costs. So really what we figured out, in that space, over the past couple of years, there's been a growth of customer success solutions. So companies like Gainsight, Natero. Gainsight was really the first and is the leader. And if you do a quick Google search on Gainsight or look them up on Crunchbase or AngelList, you can see they've raised a ton of money. And those solutions really kind of go on top of your CRM. And in a B2B context, maybe that's Salesforce, maybe even Zendesk for kind of communicating with the customers after the fact, plugging into your web application or your service or your database. And really what those solutions do, you have all your customers, but the question is, who do you focus on now? Who's likely to leave? And if you have a team of support agents, how do you know Susie's doing well compared to Sally, right? Because you want to keep people around for the long term. You don't just want to answer the question. It's what to focus on. So we're building the first B2C customer success solution. We don't compete with Zendesk. We integrate with it. So we don't want to try to outdo Zendesk. And we think there's a lot of competition in that space, and we didn't feel like we could really add anything with what they're trying to accomplish. But we integrate with chat, phone, and ticketing. We pull all of that raw data out, and we answer questions like, what can I do to decrease the number of tickets I get that actually just costs me money to answer them? So am I using FAQs well? How many of my agents are just doing repetitive stuff that's not adding value to the business? On average, we found when we come in, most companies they could decrease the amount of tickets by 20 to 30% really easily out of the gate. But they just don't have a good way of measuring those things. And we think there's solutions like Zendesk. They're a little bit at odds with that priority because they charge on a per seat basis. So they want you to have more employees, which costs you more money because that's how they make more money. So they haven't invested a lot in their product to really help you decrease tickets that cost you money. So, hey, let's decrease the tickets we're getting. Let's actually be more efficient. You went from the cloud, now you had spreadsheets, now you have live reports, and now you have reports ad nauseum. You need a degree in running reports in a lot of software these days. So in plain language understanding, hey, Justin, focus on this. Agents automatically via Slack or via email at the end of the day, hey, Sally, you were 20% faster than the rest of the team at handling ticket type returns today. Hey, great job, keep it up. Now, we're automating some things like that, bringing more transparency without the complication to figure out what to focus on to actually have better support and service to the customers, make the job a bit more tolerable for the customer support agents. And then with all that savings, actually figure out how to make support a department that actually drives revenue, actually makes money. Fundamentally, I'm a marketing guy, not an operations guy. And I think there's been a lot of business platitudes about, hey, retention, support, it's marketing. But, I don't think there's been a lot of substance behind that actually happening in organizations. So part of our solution, helps companies track back, hey, instead of paying Sally $12 an hour, if she's making us money, we actually track that. Let's incentivize that behavior and increase that. So long answer. Our things are in beta right now, so the website's relatively thin as of time of recording here, late December. But yeah, we're excited. We're going to be raising a standard round of institutional financing in calendar year 2017, and yeah, we're super excited.
Awesome. So, is this your first software company that you've started?
It is. Yep.
So I've developed 2 proprietary platforms during my career. One was a niche social network, and the other was a custom cart, / CRM. really everything: cart, content management, customer management, affiliate management, all of that stuff. And both cases were, well, the social media platform did very well from a user standpoint, but it eventually fell and crumbled onto itself because it wasn't coded for that kind of growth or longevity. And so I, easily put $1 million into that over 2 years, and eventually it got to a point where it's either, hey, you've got to start over from scratch with a completely new platform, or it would be more expensive to fix this. And I just shut the thing down. So, what are some of the pieces of advice or lessons learned that you've could share with us here today when it comes to developing software?
Yeah. So, one of the things that I struggled with early on, not being technically inclined. I can henpeck at some HTML to change a color on something, but that's about it. And I really focused my time as kind of a business and marketing primary person on, hey, I'm not going to insult a software engineer and say, hey, I can do some class over the weekend and think or convince myself I'm as proficient as them in making strategy decisions about code, coding languages to use, tools to use, software kind of strategy from an architectural standpoint. So I really have spent and continue to spend my time on kind of product management and product strategy. So that is I read the tech press, the new products that are coming out. I look to people who are building awesome things, who are seeing the results, and then I talk to them. I learn how they're doing things. I, try to understand, what languages are they using, right? To start to build kind of the vocabulary set to be able to know the difference between the developer down the road who has that web agency, who builds WordPress sites, who says they can also quote unquote build software, and hiring them when they sell me that they can build me that solution, and knowing the difference between that and, maybe someone I stumbled upon online who happened, used to work at Google, but is now a freelancer, and I can see their portfolio, who also can build a solution. So being confident in what you don't know, but aligning yourself with the type of people who have built the types of things that you want to build. And, again, I think one of those credibility indicators is, particularly in software, I mean, you can't help but look at people who build software in the software capital world or capitals, Silicon Valley, New York, Boston. And if they haven't been there, they haven't been at that company building that thing, and they quote unquote can build software, and they have like a quote unquote IT background, just learning the difference between those things over time, you kind of, you build a repertoire and you kind of build that discernment to do that. And if you're a business primary person, I would say, you need to immerse yourself in that technology startup world as a business person to learn those things and learn to build that wisdom and that discernment. And there are increasingly a lot of great solutions for business primary people. Solutions like Gigster, which instead of, hey, just hiring a random freelancer and you basically taking on the role of CTO by making strategy decisions about technology stacks, you can speak to a product person who used to work at Google. You could say, hey, this is what I want the end goal to be, and they'll help make some of those decisions. So solutions like Gigster, as opposed to just going on Upwork and hiring the cheapest PHP developer or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I mean that was the mistake I made for my first social network. Is I found the first guy who seemed really smart, who said he could do it, and said okay, because it is speaking another language, and if you don't speak a language, you can't judge the quality of the work anyway. Yeah. And so I've got my guy who built the system. And it was just duct tape and bubble gum, So when the guy goes away and you bring someone else to fix it, it's impossible to decipher, and it's just spaghetti code. So, did you hire your engineers in house, or did you find an agency that you have confidence in?
Yeah. So, based on my kind of several years so far of knowing engineers and kind of being able to speak the language, I'm comfortable enough to the point being able to have some of those top level conversations with a developer directly. And part of kind of product strategy is prioritizing feature sets. It's not design, but it is design. It's layout, it's usability, it's some of those things. So Right now, our full-time team, it's my co-founder who leads operations, and then we have only just one other full-time person physically with us, our creative director, Melanie Fisher-Wellman, and she also leads product design as well. And then so far to date, what we've done, at least for our product, because we have more of a solution sale, where we're auditing systems on the front end and we're kind of sealing a deal, a large part of our output right now is the intel on the best decisions to make. And we don't have any front-end software yet. I'll put it like that. And for our space, that works as kind of a bootstrapped way to get there. So we haven't had to invest as much in some of those things, where if you were a consumer application or something, obviously, you're going to have to invest a lot more on the front end for something like that. So it definitely is in our cards, within the next 12 months, we're going to be hiring much more intentionally internally for kind of a VP of engineering type, right? And, we know when it comes time to hire those people, you want to be able to hire those people, and those people who are good, they are not for lack of jobs, needless to say. So being able to pay market and everything, at least for us, we don't have to scale yet. We're validating some of the specifics of the product, and that is, us, basically running back-end code and crazy amounts of spreadsheets to provide the output for that additional intel.
Very cool. Very cool. So where can people go to connect with you and to learn more about BoostOpia and to keep up on you guys' progress and maybe join the waitlist?
Yeah, definitely. So BoostOpia.io. So BoostOpia.io. And then you can sign up for our list there. We have a little waiting list. You also follow BoostOpia on Twitter. And then, personally, at JC Winter on Twitter. And then website, IamJustinWinter.com. And that has, all my social profiles and my blog content and all that type of stuff.
Yeah, great blog content. I've really enjoyed going through that. I learned quite a bit. So awesome. Well, Justin Winter, thank you so much for joining us here today. You've shared some words of wisdom for sure and some fantastic resources. So I'm going to go check those out. So thank you so much. We're going to have all of the resources and services and tools that we've talked about here today in the show notes, guys. So make sure you go check that out. And thank you, Justin, for being here. I appreciate your time and looking forward to watching you guys, hopefully take this thing to the moon.
My pleasure. Thank you, Mike.
Spirit of things, we lose our sight when we put our trust in things of this material world, the things that fade.